Hello, and welcome back to Part 2 of iLearningU's How to Respond to Audit Non-conformances training. In Part 1 of the training, we discussed the audit report and what to do if you don't agree with the auditor's conclusions. We also covered roles and responsibilities, the standard that guides your certification body, timing requirements for responding to non-conformances, the process for closing out non-conformances, and the consequences of not responding. In Part 2, we will cover how to respond to non-conformances, issues we see as auditors, and what we expect. In Part 3 of the training, we will discuss what to expect after you send in your non-conformance response to your auditor or certification body. Many companies use their internal corrective action process to address their audit non-conformances. As long as your corrective action system covers the information requirements set out by your certification body, it should be fine to use your corrective action form. Many audit firms will allow you to simply attach your internal corrective action record to the form used by the certification body. Check with your auditor to determine if this is acceptable by your certification body if you want to use your internal form. Now we will cover how to respond to your non-conformances. First, you need to identify your correction. Identify the steps you took to address the specific incidents noted by the auditor during the audit. Additionally, consider researching your processes to uncover all occurrences of the same failure that exist in your organization and fix those also. For example, your procedure states that managers verify their employees' competence after training and sign a record to reflect that they have confirmed the employee's competence. During your third-party audit, the auditor reviewed the training records and found 4 incidents across 2 supervisors where the records were not signed off. These instances are recorded as objective evidence supporting the non-conformance issued to your organization. The auditor is only able to audit a sample of the management system due to time constraints. This does not mean that the issue is limited to these 4 instances. That is for the company to determine. The company needs to ensure that the 4 incidents noted are resolved, so the supervisors need to confirm competence and sign off on those 4 records as part of the correction. Additionally, there should be a company-wide review of the current records to ensure the problem does not exist elsewhere. Once all the records are reviewed and corrected as appropriate, the correction is complete. One of the common issues we see as auditors is that the company inappropriately categorizes a correction as a corrective action. In the previous example, a company might consider fixing the 4 incidents as the correction and the review of the remaining records as the corrective action. The intent of the corrective action is to prevent the issue from recurring. The actions taken to research and correct all training records on file in no way prevents a future recurrence, but instead only focuses on cleaning up the current system. For this reason, correcting the 4 incidents and reviewing the rest of the records and making corrections as necessary both fall under the category of the correction. The next step is to conduct a root cause analysis. An effective root cause analysis will identify the process reasons that the issue occurred. There are multiple problem-solving tools that can be used to get to the root cause. Many companies use a problem-solving tool called the 5 why analysis. The intent of this tool is to identify the cause of the non-conformance and dig deeper and deeper until arriving at the root cause of an issue. For example, building on the previous example, the initial question might be, why are training records not being signed off by the supervisors consistently? And the response? Because the supervisors are not always notified that the employees have completed their training, so they don't know they need to confirm the competence. The second why? Why are the supervisors not notified that the training is complete? Or another why could be, why are supervisors waiting to be notified? Another level 2 why could be, why aren't the supervisors checking to see that the training is complete? All 3 of these potential causes reflect options for the level 2 reason, and we need to dig deeper since we are still not at the root cause. Sometimes people identify these 3 as the whys and do not dig deeper, but instead just identify 5, or in this case, 3 different reasons. The idea is to dig deeper 5 levels deep, not identify 5 different reasons and consider yourself done with the assessment. The response to why the supervisors are not notified the training is complete is because the trainers are filling in the training record in the database and thought this would let the supervisor know that the training was complete. This would represent 1 level deeper. And the next question, why would the trainers assume the supervisors would know? This leads us to the next level, which is because the trainers receive a notification that the database was updated and figured the supervisor also received the notification. As you can see, we continue to dig deeper. Why aren't the supervisors also receiving notification that the record has been updated when the training is complete? This leads us to the root cause. The database is not programmed to include the supervisor. We have now dug down to what we believe is the root cause. In some cases, it might take more than 5 levels deep to get to the root cause. The main point is to dig deeper and deeper until you believe you have arrived at the root of the issue. Some things to consider when using the 5 why analysis as the problem-solving tool are: this tool is opinion-based, and previous biases may incorrectly guide the problem-solving to a preconceived answer that really isn't the true root cause. Often, there is more than one reason for a problem to occur. Sometimes the 5 why leads you down a single path. If this is a complex issue, it might take a more comprehensive analysis to prevent the problem from occurring again. The 5 why analysis can be a valuable tool for problem solving, but there are inherent risks in using brainstorming tools alone without any data-based validation. Another approach to uncover the root cause might be to use more formal data analysis tools. One of the more simple tools to use is the Pareto analysis. In this case, you would gather data on the reasons that the issue occurred. Going back to the previous example, when the review of all the records was conducted to address the correction, the management tracked the cause of each instance that the record was not complete, and the following data was gathered and charted. The most frequent reason the record was not complete was due to the supervisor not tracking their employees in training, so they did not verify their competence. The second most frequent reason was that the managers were still confirming their employees' competence, so had intentionally left the competence field of the record blank. And the third most frequent reason was because the supervisor did not realize they needed to complete the record. They assumed the trainer completed the competency record. These were the most frequent reasons. Then the occurrences drop off dramatically to minor issues. The point of the Pareto diagram is to separate the vital few, the top 3 reasons, from the trivial many, the other 12 categories of reasons. Following the 80-20 rule, if this process owner focuses on the top 3 reasons, although this represents about 20% of the reasons, it will resolve 80% of the issue. In this case, we will focus on the first cause, identifying why the supervisors are not tracking their employees in training, and the third cause, that the supervisors incorrectly assumed that the trainers were responsible for verifying competency and completing the record. The second most frequent cause is a valid reason for not signing the form, so that won't be addressed. Now we will continue to dig deeper into why the supervisors are not tracking their employees' training. We may use brainstorming techniques like a fishbone analysis or the 5 why analysis, or we might dig deeper using another Pareto diagram. There are also other problem-solving tools we could use for our data analysis. We need to dig deeper and deeper until we believe we identified the root cause. After further analysis, we determine the scheduling program is supposed to place the training on the supervisor's calendar, but the software has a bug. We now know the preventive-based process solution to recommend ensuring the supervisors are aware their employees are in training. In the case that the supervisors assume the trainers handled the competency, we interviewed the supervisors to determine why they believed the trainers would handle this. After digging deeper, we determined that the training work instruction states that the trainers complete the record. We now also know how to prevent this cause from recurring. Points to consider when using the objective problem-solving tools for the root cause analysis include: in order to gather objective evidence on the cause, the problem needs to be a repetitive issue. If the occurrence was a special cause and not repetitive, you might not be able to gather the data required to get to an objective conclusion. In this case, you may not be able to conduct an effective root cause analysis, but please do not jump to this conclusion to avoid an effective root cause analysis. There are a multitude of problem-solving tools that can be used to get to the root cause. Consider the risk of implementing an inaccurate conclusion when choosing the appropriate analysis methodology. For example, the cost to implement the wrong solution, the cost on customer and/or employee satisfaction, the cost of the analysis process, the cost of rework, and more will factor into the risk assessment to determine the appropriate root cause analysis approach to use. Some of the issues we see when reviewing non-conformance responses related to the root cause analysis are: the root cause analysis is related to why the incidents noted in the problem statement occurred instead of analyzing the process causes. In this example, the response would have identified why the 4 records were not filled out complete instead of looking at the overall process of why training records are not appropriately signed. Typically, when the focus is on the incidents instead of the process, the answer is they made a mistake or more training is needed. For example, Charlie screwed up, so train Charlie. The focus ends up being on the person who made a mistake instead of the process deficiencies that could cause the errors to occur. Another problem we see is that the analysis did not dig down to the root cause and instead addressed the top-level reason. Often it seems that employees have preconceived ideas of why a problem occurred, so they jump to conclusions and solutions without an appropriate analysis. Or they may just want to get it off their desk. If you find your management frequently stating, "I thought we solved this already," chances are management is jumping to the incorrect conclusions to quickly solve problems without appropriate cause analysis. And sometimes there is not a link between the problem and the cause analysis. Effective root cause analysis is a prime focus area of the accreditation bodies, certification bodies, and the auditors. The auditors and technical reviewers are not accepting responses that do not include an effective root cause analysis. The key points to remember when completing the root cause analysis are: ensure the focus is on the process and not the incidents noted in the problem statement. When addressing the correction, if you look to see how broad-based the problem is, as was done in the example where we looked at all the records to correct any other errors, we could also see if the problem was systemic across the organization or if it was isolated to a few instances. Knowing if the problem is systemic or isolated should help determine what the causes are and guide the appropriate course of action to prevent the recurrence. History has shown that 85% of problems are due to the process and 15% are due to people. So instead of focusing on who caused the problem, focus on what caused the problem. Of concern is that although 85% of the problems should be attributed to the process, when we look at the suggested solutions on the corrective and preventive actions and NCR responses, 95% of the time, the cause and solution are attributed to the people. Continue to dig deeper until you believe you have determined the root cause or causes of the problem. Use objective data analysis where possible and practical to prevent biased assumptions and minimize the risk of the problem recurring. At a minimum, use a 5 why analysis to get to the root cause. Ensure there is a direct correlation between the problem statement, the cause analysis, and the solution identified. Once you have identified the root cause or causes, you can now determine the corrective action. The corrective action identifies the solution to prevent the recurrence of the non-conformance. In the example, we have been following an order to address the top 3 reasons identified. The first reason is a software bug where the supervisor is not being notified, so the solution was put in a software update to automatically populate the supervisor's schedule with their employee training dates and courses. As stated earlier, reason 2, where the training record was intentionally blank since the confirmation of competency was not yet complete, will not be addressed as the company determined this was acceptable. And finally, the third issue required a procedure update to reflect the current practice. Once the procedure was updated, the supervisors were trained on the updated procedure. The corrective actions focused on preventing the problem from recurring in the future, were process-based solutions, and were directly related to the root causes identified. When initially responding to a non-conformance, you will only need to identify your plan to prevent the recurrence of the issue. This is the plan for the corrective action based on your root cause analysis. In this case, we plan to update the software and update the procedure. If the non-conformance was a minor non-conformance, the effective implementation will be confirmed by your auditor at the next audit. If the non-conformance was a major non-conformance, you will need to implement the solution and verify it eliminated the non-conformance within a predetermined period of time, identified by your auditor. Your auditor will then return to close out the non-conformance in order to maintain certification. The main problems we see with the corrective actions is that the solution identified is the same as the correction and/or only addresses the incident. It does not identify a solution that will prevent the future recurrence of the non-conformance. As stated earlier, the other issue is that the solution is not correlated to the problem or root cause identified. Ensure your corrective actions prevent the recurrence of the non-conformance, and don't simply clean up past records and practices. That concludes Part 2 of iLearningU's How to Respond to Audit Non-conformances. In Part 3 of the training, we will discuss what to expect after you send in your non-conformance response to your auditor or certification body.